Hello, Bitcoiners. The Bitcoin is going to the moon, as we say. It's going to the moon. I want America to be the nation that leads the way.
Kamala Harris is being briefed by her closest advisors, being told that it's mathematically impossible for her to win.
Make no mistake about it, guys. We as a family, and my father in office, we're going to lead the charge doing this. You know, we're going to be on the forefront of this innovation. We're going to be on the forefront, and we'll continue to champion Bitcoin.
Have a good time with your Bitcoin and your crypto and everything else that you're playing with.
Hello and welcome. You're watching Bitcoin Magazine. We're broadcasting live from the PubKey Bar and Restaurant in New York City. It's Inauguration Day 2025. And of course, I'm your host, Pete Rizzo, editor-at-large of the Kraken Cryptocurrency Exchange, editor at Bitcoin Magazine, and Bitcoin historian on X. And today, we are making history as Donald J. Trump, the first crypto president and the 47th president of the United States, is sworn in as the leader of the free world. We're going to be spending the next 8 hours breaking it down with a run of special guests, and of course, there's much to discuss. Bitcoin smashing all-time highs last night, over $108,000 on major exchanges, and the expectations are high for day one. Executive orders relating to Ross Ulbricht, founder of Silk Road, and a strategic Bitcoin reserve on the table, possible to become law today. And of course, the twist that hangs over it all, Trump's action in the crypto market, shaking things up with the launch of not one but two coins of his own overnight this weekend. The price of Bitcoin right now on Gemini.com, America's exchange, $107,000. And we're going to be here recapping moments from the campaign trail. I'm joined now by special guest Frank Corva, business correspondent at Bitcoin Magazine. We've got Nolan Bowerly, host of Bitcoin on Rumble, breaking it all down. So let's start where it all began, and now we're here. The campaign that shook things up, that made history. Donald Trump about to take office. What does it feel like to be here in this moment? Bitcoin going from pariah under the Biden administration to mainstream now? That's the question. Frank.
That's a great question, especially a great question to ask here at PubKey in New York City, where Donald Trump actually came, where I met him just right over there by the bar when he came here to purchase at the time, which was about, I don't know, $990 worth of burgers that he then gave out to the crowd here. And of course, he made that purchase with Bitcoin. And I say at the time that's what it was worth because I think Bitcoin was trading at about $65,000 that day when he came to make that purchase. So now that's almost a $2,000 purchase of burgers, but a monumental moment. And I think, whatever your feelings about Trump are, to have a president now embrace Bitcoin, to come here and make a payment, to buy burgers with it, to run on a pro-Bitcoin platform, these are exciting times, and it's great to be here to commemorate that.
Nolan, you've been in this industry since 2014, 2013, early days. Things were quite different. What does it feel like now to watch this president come into office with all that he's done for the industry? Your experience?
For me, it's interesting to be aligned with the optimism that Bitcoiners have always had about the future. You talk to a lot of these people who are running on, let's call it fiat programming. They're getting their information from fiat information sources, and you see the pessimism. The Biden administration, to me, was riddled with this pessimism about the future. The inability to see a bright future for everybody, for Americans and for Bitcoin holders. I know that's what drew me to Bitcoin originally. To me, I already realized 10 years ago that the political road towards an optimistic future was over. It was riddled with all kinds of troubles. And as a Bitcoiner, it offered me a lens through which I could envision a much brighter future for all of humanity. And to see that being aligned now with an administration, of course, Trump brings that optimism, right? He is, if anything, you can say what you want, he is optimistic about America's future. And now to see this optimism that Americans and Bitcoiners have become aligned is the most enjoyable thing for me personally, because you were kind of weird if you were as optimistic as Bitcoiners were 10 years ago, right? I'm excited about what the future can bring. I'm not worried about the polar ice caps melting. I know we can handle that. I'm not worried about war anymore. We see that the war mechanisms, the war finance stuff is going to have a lot of trouble going forward, especially if we get a Bitcoin strategic reserve and we change the financial system. If we fix the money, we can fix the world. Bitcoiners have understood that mimetically for a long time, and to watch that meme now spread throughout America, which is an inherently optimistic place. And for those last 4 years, we weren't. And I've been walking around New York City all day. I fled New York City during the 2020 era. And now to come back and walk through Washington Square Park this morning and seeing that bright sunshine and the snow freshly fallen and knowing that the energy is with us and that Bitcoiners are here and a bright future is ahead.
Well, it's a new day, metaphorically and literally. Frank, want to throw it over to you. You were at the crypto ball this weekend in Washington, D.C., inaugural. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the excitement in that room. What are people expecting as Donald Trump takes office today?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's interesting now to see synergy, right? So there's now a synergy between the political class and Bitcoiners and this whole world. And generally speaking, just as a backdrop for everyone, it was a bit of a wild experience in that, you have this sort of Bitcoin crypto contingent. It's obviously that, it's the crypto ball. We have the political contingent, and then to the backdrop of all that, we have Snoop Dogg and Rick Ross performing. So it was quite an experience just from a sensorial sense or perspective. But it was interesting to see. You go from having a conversation with someone like Senator Lummis to seeing someone like the All In crowd, and then Jesse Powell from Kraken standing, over here. And it's just an interesting thing to see all of these people together in one room. What this all ends up looking like, and sort of the embrace of Bitcoin, obviously some of the broader crypto system as well. There's a lot, we have to sort of be excited about it in one sense, but be vigilant in another sense, right? We're seeing on the other side, we're seeing Trump, pumped up about Bitcoin, which is great to see. And on the other side, we're seeing things like the Samurai hearing. We're seeing crackdown, more KYC, more AML. So while we can be very, very excited moving forward, us as Bitcoiners in this space, we need to be very, very conscious of maintaining the Bitcoin ethos as it moves into the spotlight. And I think that's a really, really big factor that I won't say some are underestimating. I know a lot of the people I'm closest with in this space are very concerned with this. So it's really, really important, I think, that, to put it in Jeff Booth's terms, he often says we are Bitcoin, right? We're the ones that plug in the nodes. We're the ones that run the miners. We're the ones that defend Bitcoin in the mainstream media. We try to, convert the normies, if you will. So I think it's really, really important that we stay in that mindset as we engage in these conversations with people in power.
Of course, we're taking questions on YouTube, Rumble, and X, streaming live for the next 8 hours. Of course, in the middle, we'll see Donald J. Trump become the 47th president of the United States. I want to go back to you, Nolan. Obviously, we're up against an historic moment. Frank was talking about the diverse constituencies that sort of assembled to put Trump in office. What does a successful day one look like for Trump with this constituency in mind, with Bitcoin at the center of his priorities?
Well, I think the Free Ross movement had a lot to do with aligning Bitcoiners behind him, because we've seen politics to be red and blue for a long time, Democrat and Republican. One thing that Bitcoiners brought by aligning with Trump is they kind of broke that mold. They really made it green and orange. And the Free Ross movement was a big thing that sealed that. So to me, that's a non-negotiable, right? You're going to get to a world where there's going to be instant conflict between the Trump administration and Bitcoiners if that doesn't happen. And that's probably a healthy thing in some ways, right? You don't want to be in a situation where you have to defend everything Trump does. That's one of the worst things that happened with the Biden administration. Its incompetence forced you to have to defend Trump about litigation. We couldn't even have a reasonable conversation about the lawfare and things like that. A lot of Bitcoiners were forced, and a lot of just supporters of Trump were forced into supporting about everything. Now, Trump has plenty of flaws, of course. So I think we'll be in a healthy place if Bitcoiners are able to criticize policy. It doesn't mean you don't like the guy, it doesn't mean you're not for him for other things, but we'll be back in a healthy place if we criticize him. Now, I don't want to have to criticize him about Ross. So let's just hope that day one, get this off the bat, right? It was Free Ross, not just Free Ross.
We've got the sign on the back, Free Ross, day one. Going to send it now to a recap, a live interview that was shot at the Crypto Ball this weekend in Washington, D.C. We're going to hear now from Kraken chairman Jesse Powell, of course, a Bitcoin legend in his own right. We'll be right back after this presentation.
Okay, how does it feel to be here after so many years?
It feels amazing. I feel like it's almost time to take the victory lap. Got a few more days. I think the next 4 years are going to be just amazing. The handcuffs are off, the rockets are going to fly, and the crypto industry is going to be what it always could be.
Yo, I love that. You said the handcuffs are off. And we've seen, I feel like we're going to see so many people here that have been accused of, money laundering when, Bitcoin first started. And look at us now, here in DC, taking that victory lap. What are you going to do to celebrate?
I'm going to shake a lot of hands, kiss a few babies, buy some more Bitcoin, and try to get out of here before that Arctic blast comes in.
Okay. What do you mean, Arctic blast? What is that?
They moved the inauguration indoors for the first time in history because of this cold storm that's coming in. It's going to be dangerously cold outside, they said.
How ironic is it that us Bitcoiners are here in the U.S. Capitol celebrating a pro-Bitcoin president? When you first got into Bitcoin, did you ever think this would happen?
I thought the government would ignore us for a long time and then fight us. And I never thought that we would have a president that really embraces Bitcoin. And now it's so much more than the president. It's the whole cabinet. It's so many senators and congresspeople. It seems like we're having a real turn in the government, toward Bitcoin, which is amazing. And it's going to help a lot of people. People have been underserved by the banks, by the financial system, not just in the States, but all over the world. And so it feels so great. I mean, for our company, for Kraken, we're over 13 years old, so it's been a very long road, and I'm more optimistic than ever.
But do you think it's sort of contradictory? Bitcoin is like freedom, and we're here celebrating that politicians are embracing it?
Well, they should embrace it. It's not something that needs to. It's only good if the government ignores it. I think that having the stamp of approval from the government will help adoption. And, for the last 4 years, the government has really just been in the way. And so this is really just, also a celebration of having the freedom again, not having the government at our backs trying to shut us down every day. So, I didn't think we would get to this position, but it feels like we've done a total 180 just since the election. Things are already going in the right direction.
I do want to highlight, so you are a professional Magic the Gathering player. But still, it's super cool. It's super cool. And how did Mt. Gox sort of influence you into starting Kraken? Can you tell me a little about?
Yeah, well, when Mt. Gox got hacked back in June of 2011, I flew out to Tokyo to help them recover from that whole incident. During the course of that experience, realized that basically the whole industry was shut down because we only had one exchange at the time. And no one knew what the price was, and it was a major problem. And so I came away from that experience thinking we need more than one exchange, and somebody's got to do this the right way and have a very professional operation if Bitcoin's going to be successful. And so that whole thing was the inspiration. It was so early days, and I'm glad now there are even more exchanges and people have a choice. And if anyone goes down, it's not clearly we've had exchange blowups like FTX, but it's not the end of the world. There are other exchanges that people can go to, and so the industry is so much more resilient now. There's so much more redundancy. We have multiple blockchains that are functional. So that whole experience, I mean, it's just been like growing pains for the industry, I think, the whole time. And I feel like we'll still have some more growing pains, I think. But, the thing that we really want to accomplish now to address a lot of the pain that we've had is we want to get new legislation out so that there's no more reading into the old laws and making interpretations of things. We really want, we'll have a friendly government administration now for the next 4 years, I think, but who knows what happens after that. So we want to get the laws changed. We need the industry to come together and agree on something. I don't think everyone's going to get what they want, but I think in order to, move forward and not have to deal with a hostile SEC again in the future, for example, I think we need to change some laws. And I think there's some things we can all agree on, and we should try to get that done soon.
You say that we need to unite. What can us plebs sort of do to, push on this pro-Bitcoin agenda?
I think call your members of government, your representatives in government, let them know how important it is to you. You can talk to your crypto service providers, wallets, exchanges, anyone you do business with, and tell them what you think about what the laws should be. Obviously, that's all over the world, not just in the United States. In many ways, we're still behind. Europe is further ahead in getting some clarity here. So I think that's what the average person can do. Obviously, support politicians that are pro crypto, and vote against the ones that aren't. And we did very well in the last election, and I think by the next time we have to elect representatives, I think there'll be a lot more crypto support, because it was clear that if you didn't support crypto in the last election, you lost.
So, as someone who has maintained a strong stance on freedom, how do you navigate the tension between advocating for decentralized principles and complying with increasing regulations?
I'm not a fan of regulation generally. However, I think responsible, reasonable regulation is better than bad regulation. And I don't think it's realistic to think that we're going to live in a world where there's just no financial services regulations. And so I think the best thing we can do is try to help shape that regulation, make it as consumer friendly as possible, and make it as business friendly as possible, while still having some guardrails there that allow the really bad actors to be discovered and prosecuted. And so I don't see those things are at odds. And, we still will continue to promote DeFi and people doing more things on chain, which largely still exists outside of the scope of the regulators. And so I think long term we'll see more and more activity shift on chain, and that'll really be, what we want to make sure with the legislation is that activity does not somehow get captured in a way that it's not right now, where all the miners have to KYC everybody or something like that. So, the regulation's coming for us. There's really nothing we can do about it other than try to shape it in.
So you've been fearless in speaking.
Bitcoin Magazine, we're broadcasting live from the PubKey Bar and Restaurant in New York City. It's Inauguration Day 2025, just 2.5 hours away from Donald J. Trump being sworn in as the 47th President of the United States. The price of Bitcoin on Gemini.com, America's exchange, $106,000 and rising. We're joined now by some new special guests. We've got to my left, Nico Moran, host of the Simply Bitcoin podcast, and to his left, Shinobi, technical editor at Bitcoin Magazine, talking now about closing the doors on the Joseph R. Biden administration and this new tone that has been set by Trump, the reaction now from the Bitcoin community. How do you feel about the tone that Trump is setting now, heading into inauguration on Bitcoin and crypto? Obviously, the reversal has been huge, as Nolan and Frank were talking about earlier. There was a terse administration that was penalizing the industry. Now the gates seem open. Is that what we want? How do we feel about it? Shinobi, let's go over to you.
I think it's a little too open, given the events of the last 2 days. I mean, he's clearly kind of just setting things up for anything goes. Like the fact that a soon-to-be sitting American president just launched a meme coin where he had 80%, I think, of the supply pre-mined, and he's already moved on and launched one for his wife as well. This is just insane. We are in the craziest clown world timeline at this point.
But obviously some of this is good, right? Publicity for the industry is good. There will be Bitcoin companies and parts of the industry that benefit from this. How do you weigh the concerns? It sounds like Shinobi on the more concerned side. Nico, your take.
Yeah, I think two things could be true at the same time, right? Without a shadow of a doubt, Trump launched a meme coin. I'm personally not a fan of that, but at the end of the day, it's people's problem whether they want to buy it or not. But you can't deny that the industry overall is feeling extremely optimistic about the incoming Trump administration, his promise to end the so-called Operation Choke Point 2.0, the ability for Bitcoin entrepreneurs to really innovate in the United States without fear of regulatory persecution. So I think overall, I'm feeling a tremendous amount of optimism for the industry. But to echo what Shinobi was saying, I mean, yeah, I'm obviously not that thrilled about Trump's meme coin, but I think two things could be true at the same time.
We heard from Jesse Powell, chairman at Kraken. He was talking about just how chilling that environment was, really what they were prevented from doing as a exchange operating in the United States. Shinobi, tossing it back over to you. Isn't it good that Gary Gensler is gone, that we have a new SEC administration? How does this SEC administration move forward? I guess, what would you like to see?
Well, I mean, honestly, I would kind of like a more balanced approach in line with what Gary was pushing for. I do on one hand, feel very strongly that people should have the freedom to make their own mistakes and choices in a market. But at the same time, like, there are just too many things in this space that are undeniably like scams outright, like actively misleading, misinforming consumers before they invest their money in this or like whatever project is, the point of concern. And I don't think that should be socially acceptable. Like, I don't think we should be encouraging or facilitating or just even kind of removing ourselves from commenting on like those types of activities. It's predatory. Like what that.
Well, this has
that
been a
type
cornerstone
activity
of the Bitcoin constituency for a long time, right? That Bitcoiners have felt that the crypto part of the industry is predatory. How do you look at that, Nico?
Yeah, I mean, look, it is because so obviously as Bitcoiners we know that Bitcoin is unique, Bitcoin is different. Everything trends to zero, compared to Bitcoin. But at the same time, there's like the libertarian argument, which is kind of like, look, if people want to buy Trump coin, should the government be in the business of getting to pick and choose what you can and what you cannot buy? So it's obviously a very slippery slope. Now, what concerns me is, again, what Shinobi was saying a couple days ago. I think we were very optimistic as a community, Trump winning this election, the price of Bitcoin reacting to his historic win. But what concerns me is I think as all altcoins end up eventually, I think people are going to have to put it nicely, a bad experience at the end buying something that isn't Bitcoin. But I think we have to balance the two, right? Do we really want the government in the business of getting to decide what people can buy, what people cannot buy? So, I mean, it's tricky, but I think once people figuratively burn their finger on the stove, all roads lead to Bitcoin eventually.
Shobi, I want to kick it back to you. Obviously, day one here, we've got Free Ross day one back here at PubKey. Obviously, expectations are high. Talking now about the tone that Trump can set, maybe putting aside some of the stuff that happened over the weekend in terms of the market turmoil. How does Trump send a positive message to you on day one? What can he do? Was it the strategic Bitcoin reserve? Is it freeing Ross? Is there something else that you want to see as we look to Donald Trump taking the presidency today?
I just want to see Ross go home and go back to his family. I'm actually against a strategic reserve, so I'm not really that interested in whether that happens today, like through just the executive order path or something that he can do unilaterally.
And of course, it seems like it will be possible today for a pardon to happen. Of course, once Trump is sworn in, he will have all of the powers of the presidency, but is it really realistic? Do you think expectations are too high? Do you think Ross maybe is released this week, later on? Nico, how are you looking at it?
I don't know if it's going to happen today. I do believe it's going to happen within the first 30 days. I think that Bitcoiners, specifically, to be fair, the Bitcoin and crypto community contributed a lot to the Trump campaign in the form of donations, but also in the form of support. You can make a very solid argument that Kamala lost the election because people perceived her to be anti-crypto, and a huge demographic of the Democratic voting base is younger people. Younger people tend to be owners of Bitcoin. So I think Trump does owe the Bitcoin community, the Bitcoin industry, a favor, and he should definitely keep his word. I personally feel extremely optimistic. I think Ross will be free. I don't know if it's going to happen on day one, but I expect it to happen within the first 30 days.
We'll be revisiting moments from the campaign trail coming up. Going to send it back now to another interview happening at the Crypto Ball this weekend in Washington, D.C. You're going to hear from Galaxy Research's Alex Thorne. We'll be right back leading up to the inauguration of Donald Trump.
Inaugural Crypto Ball. Of course we're backstage because we're going to interview the best people from the space. All right, we got Alex Thorne, and of course, I have to ask, do you have a rap for the Crypto Ball?
I mean, look, we always climb and we don't fall. Getting crunk throwing down at the crypto ball. Everybody knows that there is no second best. And I got no second best. I mean, I only got one. Yeah. I know. Do my best here, Isabel. I'm doing my best.
Your best is great. I love it.
Very nice.
Are you gonna go up stage and make competition with Snoop Dogg, D.O.G.?
Well, actually, if you're here right now, I don't think people know this, but Snoop has asked me to come and do a feature during his performance.
Actually?
Yeah, actually.
No way.
Yeah.
You're lying.
He wants to do a Bitcoin song. He's asked for me and Thomas Pacchia from the famous PubKey to come up. Thomas is going to dance and curl his hair. No, but I'm going to be in the audience cheering.
All right. Okay. We like that very much. Okay. Speaking of, names and everything, I'm going to tell you some names and you have to tell me the first thing that pops into your head. Okay.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah.
Michael Saylor.
So, balls of steel. Convicted.
All right. Elizabeth Warren.
Ooh, still powerful, but arch enemy.
Like Gary Gensler.
Gone.
Ooh, I like that one. Someone called him a goon.
Goon gone. Goodbye, Gensler. You're gone.
I love how all of them are just stepping down now.
They have to. I mean, he would be relegated to being a minority commissioner. It's not what you do after leading a crusade as chairman for that long. Doesn't make sense.
Do you think they kind of saw it coming? Or did they actually have hope and faith that they were going to surpass the crypto and Bitcoin army?
Yeah. Oh, man, I think they thought that they were going to take us down. I think they thought that. And frankly, look, the election ended up being a pretty resounding win for President-elect Trump. But look, at least if you watch the media, that wasn't obvious at the time. And dude, I mean, if you see a late flurry of stuff from, say, Gensler, he's suing a bunch of people on the way out. It's a little bit like a petulant child, throwing a tantrum as you tell them to go to bed. That's what it looks like to me.
100%, but I kind of love it. It shows you how powerful the Bitcoin space has come to be. Did you ever think it was going to happen like this?
No. Well, it's not that I didn't think it would happen, but I never really imagined that we would be standing here in Washington, D.C. for the first inaugural crypto ball, celebrating the fact that Bitcoin is here to stay and that, look, we're on the winning side and we really won pretty big. I think it's all about now building something durable and lasting for the next 4 years that we can all be proud of and then leaving something in law and regulation in the market that it can't be rolled back.
100%. So obviously you've seen the picture that Trump posted with RFK and Elon Musk in the private plane, and they're all eating Mickey D's.
Yeah.
Who would your entourage be if you were the president of the United States of America?
That's a really good one. By the way, shout out to RFK for bearing that, eating the Mickey D's. He's a beef tallow guy, not a seed oil guy. I know it must have pained him to see that great AI image. Oh, I got a couple. David Bailey, Thomas Pacchia, Amanda Fabiano, my friend Tyler Williams from Galaxy. Shout out T-Will. T-Bill, that's what I call him. In life, I guess I said a bunch of Bitcoin people. Yeah, Michael Saylor.
That kind of sounds like the dream entourage that everybody would want to have. Yeah. So
we're back broadcasting live from New York City. It's Inauguration Day. The price of Bitcoin on Gemini.com, America's exchange, $106,500 and hopefully climbing. We're back with our special guests here, Nico Moran and Shinobi. The question now, turning the page on the Joseph R. Biden administration, giving it a grade. How well did they do on Bitcoin and crypto? I want to go to you, Shinobi, for a definitive case, positive, negative, neutral. How does Joseph Biden's legacy get impacted by what he did for our industry or did not do?
Well, I mean, he clearly a very antagonistic administration, especially attempting to task different agencies to intentionally find the problems in this space or things that needed to be regulated or addressed. And I feel like he kind of just set a landmark example for the Democrats of what not to do. And, you have so very few of them actually kind of learning from that. I can really only think of Ro Khanna from California that kind of comes to mind, and then Kirsten here in New York. And it's, I think, really just a horrible legacy that if the Democrats really want to build back any type of political energy, they're going to have to learn from and kind of figure out how to change course.
Well, speaking of, I want to read a tweet here. This is from last night by Rokana, who you mentioned, reading this tweet now, and I quote, elected officials must be barred from having meme coins by law. Meme coins are, quote, highly speculative and like gambling, and they must be registered with the SEC. So I think we're already seeing Democrats come out and take a consistent tone with the Biden administration. Would you disagree, Shinobi?
Yeah, I'd say that's very consistent, and I actually agree with that. Like, I'm still kind of flabbergasted that this just happened, that a sitting president did that. Like, it's the exact same issues of, people in Congress insider trading based on legislative decisions they themselves are going to make that have an impact on how things perform in the market. It's that exact same issue, except just 1,000 times worse because it's completely unregulated at this point.
Well, maybe let's wind it back and really just take the Biden administration from top to bottom. Obviously, he did bring in Gary Gensler. There was community optimism initially about Gary Gensler. This was someone who was a professor at MIT. He had taught a class about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. And then even the Democrats during the midterm election in 2022 taking money from FTX and other industry constituents. And then the reversal after FTX, where things got cracked down. So what's a fair evaluation of this entirety of the Biden administration in your view?
Yeah, from a Bitcoin perspective, it was terrible, right? The veto.
So you're going to give it an F. Maybe I want to pin you down to some grades here.
I would give it an F minus, right? So the attack on the Bitcoin mining industry, the proposed 30% mining tax, the veto of SAB 121, which would give the ability for commercial banks to custody Bitcoin, the attack on self-custody. I mean, it just Operation Choke Point 2.0. There was a tweet that came out of Senator Cynthia Lummis basically asking members of the FDIC not to destroy documents in regards to Operation Choke Point 2.0. And I'll say that because of how the Biden administration treated the industry, it actually gave the opportunity for the Republicans to capitalize on it, to make that a political issue and bring in those voters. I think Bitcoiners are inherently apolitical. I think we didn't care about politics up until the day that the Samurai Wallet developers got arrested. And what the Treasury Department did, basically sanctioning, trying to make the case, setting the precedent, sanctioning open source software, it really woke something up in Bitcoiners, and it forced our industry to throw our hat in the ring in terms of the election. So I don't think the Republican Party, I don't think Trump would have been pro-Bitcoin or supported the industry if it wasn't for the drop ball by the Biden administration.
Of course, taking questions in the chat on YouTube, Rumble, and X will be going all day here, so feel free to write in as we respond to Inauguration Day events. An F for the Bitcoin.
F minus.
F minus for the Biden administration from Nico. Shinobi, want to pin you down a letter grade for the Biden administration, and I want to throw some quotes back at you. I mean, you've said that you would like to see maybe a continuation of some Gensler policies, and maybe some of this crackdown on crypto was good. Your final grade for Joseph Biden?
I would say an F. I'd agree with Nico, and it's I think the big error that Gensler made was I think he was directionally correct in what he was trying to do in terms of stopping a lot of the blatant fraudulent projects in the space. I think his error was trying to do the regulation by enforcement. I think he should have comprehensively looked at the entire space, and depending on whether he had the legal authority to act unilaterally or would have to go to Congress, he should have put a comprehensive kind of analysis together of this is how we should handle things regulatorily, and actually made that airtight.
Well, resounding Fs here for Joseph R. Biden. Of course, looking forward to the inauguration of Donald Trump just a little bit over an hour away. We're going to send it now to another interview from the crypto ball in Washington, D.C. this weekend. You're going to hear from CEO of Kraken, Arjun Sethi, or co-CEO of Kraken. We'll be right back after this short interview.
The company started in California, Northern California, the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, and then we became fully remote. And then over time, we decided to be much more strategic about banking and financial services. And so our SPDI bank is based in Wyoming. My other day job is I start companies, an entrepreneur. I also run a venture capital firm, so I was an early shareholder in Kraken. So we invest in all these technologies, but I think one of the misnomers is that people focus on just the technology and not the solutions. And so AI and crypto, AI and blockchain, they're all synonymous with each other, which is what technology do you use for what application. So what I've been spending most of my time is, where does that get applied? How does it get interpreted? Where does it get deployed? How do our consumers or customers use it the most? Whether that's a business, whether that's a consumer, the government, et cetera, et cetera. I think if you went back 150 to 200 years, there's these photos when people used to photograph people looking at newspapers and saying like, this is the end of the world, everyone's face is a newspaper. The next thing they talked about were these power lines where electricity was all over the place in New York, and they said this is going to be the future and it's going to be ugly. I think what people kind of forget about is that things become cheaper, better, faster. That's one. Two, we start getting more creative, more industries get built out. And so when I think about artificial general intelligence, which is what people are talking about, which is, you know, sentient being or sentient thought, I don't think it's something to get afraid of. It's more about how do you train a machine to start thinking a little bit more the way in which we do. But it's an interpretation of how we think today, how we deploy today, how we build today. So no, I'm not afraid of, you know, in fact, one of the companies that we've started or we partner with, even on the crypto side, is one is power generation for humanoid robotics. And then the other one is just a humanoid robotic that can do the tasks that we may not want to do in the future. Look, I think, there's no such thing as a job that isn't dignified in some capacity. So look, if someone it can be helped and augmented by the way in which they can, let's just say, pick agricultural goods and products, supply chain logistics, help us do our laundry, help us do our dishes, we should engage in that. I think what happens is a lot of people say, oh, we're going to have this person do our jobs, so we'll have more free time to do something else. The other way to look at it is we'll have more folks or more machines helping us do more creative tasks. So you can do more with your time than you could do before to be more productive. So that might mean here on Earth, might be in the digital realm, or it might be in space moving forward. Kraken is over 10 years old. You know, we just recently hit over $1 billion in revenue net to our company across spot, volume, crypto, futures, et cetera. And most of our customers are professional traders worldwide. And so I'm like much more excited about moving that number from 1 million to 5 million to 10 million to 100 million customers using our products. I think what's more important is that if I take a look at a individual who's young or a teenager in Africa or Latin America, Latin America is huge, as you know, so Brazil, Mexico, Colombia, we're seeing a lot of folks adopt, when I say crypto, blockchain, rails, and currencies to enable them to participate in the marketplace. So the word access to capital or democratization of finance is literally the epitome of what we've striven for here in the United States over the last 50 years. And I think crypto just makes that 100 or 1,000x better. So when you ask what I'm excited about in 2025 is how do I adopt all of those technologies in those marketplaces where they haven't seen it before. It's the mechanization of a lot of laws, how they're interpreted, how the regulators work with the companies themselves. If you take a look at the United States post-World War II, you know, it's been like a more of a brick and mortar style approach. You know, you think about the JP Morgans of the world, the Schwabs of the world, and I think the way in which we should be thinking about is how are those companies augmented by our technologies? How are those technologies going to augment our businesses? And so I think what I'm honestly most excited about is all of these laws that are being put into place regulatory-wise, legislative-wise, will just enable us to just help create more businesses, not just for us, but all the other companies that want to participate.
You just heard from Arjun Sethi, co-CEO of the Kraken Cryptocurrency Exchange. We're back broadcasting live here in New York City. It's Inauguration Day 2025. Price of Bitcoin on Gemini.com, America's Exchange, $106,000. We're back with at least one new special guest and a returning guest, Frank Corva, Senior Business Editor of Bitcoin Magazine, and Mark Hochstein, former CoinDesk editor, of course, from his time at American Banker as well. Going to dig in now to day one. Obviously, Donald Trump just a little over an hour from being sworn in, as the president will have presidential authority to fix some of the problems that Arjun was talking about in that interview. Going to list some day one initiatives that people are excited about. Obviously, we have the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. This is a proposal put forth by Senator Cynthia Lummis that the United States government might buy as much as 1 million Bitcoin over the next few years. We have Ross Ulbricht, founder of Silk Road, potentially being pardoned. And we have SAB 121 and just crypto regulation broadly, the idea that we might see some of a staying on these Biden administration orders that have so plagued the industry. Mark, let's go to you. What are you expecting on day one? What's rational, what's reasonable, and what might Trump do just to stir the pot?
So I think the easiest place to start is with what Trump has to not do. And what Trump has to not do is not sell the $65 billion worth of Silk Road seized Bitcoin that the government has. Earlier this month, a court said that the government may do this if they choose to do this. To my knowledge, they have not auctioned it.
How do you make the argument just to American citizens, say you're on the street talking to somebody, why should they support the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve? Why do they want the United States to keep this Bitcoin?
It's a really good question. I think that the theory behind it is that it could help over time to pay down the U.S. debt. That if the government stockpiles Bitcoin and that Bitcoin increases in value, then that would raise money to pay off the debt without raising taxes, without cutting expenditures, and without creating more inflation. So I think that if you have a good enough communicator who can explain that, you could get buy-in from the general public.
But this is separate from the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. It sounds like you're advocating for the stockpile, the not selling of the state order.
That would be the first step towards a Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. You mentioned the Cynthia Lummis bill. That Lummis bill faces some hurdles. Remember, the Republicans have, I think, a 53-member majority in the Senate. My understanding is that they would need 60 votes to get that through. You need 7 Democrats. 7 Democrats for a pro-Bitcoin bill seems like a big ask. So I think that's a really interesting bill. It would be wonderful if it did pass, but I think that the more realistic outcomes in terms of creating a strategic Bitcoin reserve is just holding on to what they have.
Frank, I'm going to go over to you. The Strategic Bitcoin Reserve topic now is America potentially selling its Bitcoin. Donald Trump expected to maybe make an order to stay this sale. Maybe you can talk about the Bitcoin. How much do we have? How much do we know? And what you think Trump will do on day one?
Yeah, so in terms of how much we have, from what I understand, it's somewhere in the ballpark of 200,000. I know that the DOJ just got the right to sell, I think it's upwards of 69,000 Bitcoin, so we don't know whether that's going to happen or not. Regardless, so my thoughts with the SBR, it's interesting. So we had a debate here at PubKey, I think it was on Thursday night. We had David Zell from the Bitcoin Policy Institute talking about in favor of the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, or Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, and we had Shinobi, who was just on air, talking about why it might be a not so great idea. And Shinobi's argument was around ossification, right? The protocol might now be harder to change. And David Zell's argument is that I think it's prudent for anyone, any institution, any person to hold some Bitcoin. So I sort of fall a little bit more on David's side. I don't really think buying 1 million Bitcoin is the right thing to do, especially if we're going to go print a whole bunch of dollars for that. It's not really fair to the average American person to sort of further devalue the dollar for the sake of pumping up the price of Bitcoin. I know that's not the purpose of the strategic reserve. Obviously, we would have a strategic Bitcoin reserve the same way we have a strategic gold reserve or oil reserve or something like that. But I think we sort of have to tread lightly here. I think the ideal scenario is that we just don't sell what we have. I think that's really the best way to go forward.
Well, speaking of what we have, I think it is a bit unclear. You mentioned the 200,000 Bitcoin mark held by the United States Marshal Service. Just last week, U.S. prosecutors, or a judge, I guess a circuit judge court, ruling that the U.S. has to return at least 95,000 of these Bitcoins back to Bitfinex. This is the exchange that they were illegally stolen from. Mark, does that change the scenario here? Does this escalate the potential for this? And let's just say America maybe only has 50,000 Bitcoin left. Does that accelerate the need for this kind of legislation, or maybe even a day one action in your view?
You know, I think of that as sort of a separate bucket. I mean, as you noted, that was stolen. That was the money that Ilya and
Rasul Khan.
Yeah, Rasul Khan's husband. Rasul Khan was only involved after the fact.
Okay.
I think it's only fair that the party that was that was breached get that Bitcoin back. So yeah, I mean, you know, all else, because it's not like they're dumping that on the market, right? Like if you're dumping it on the market, like if you auction the seized Bitcoin, then that's bad for the price of Bitcoin. Whereas you know, presumably the users who are going to get their money back, some of them might hold it, some of them might sell it. We'll see, but it's only fair.
But we have this number now. If it is true that the United States only has 100,000 Bitcoin to its name at this point, this is less than perhaps China and other countries. Does that concern force a day one action like a stockpile order?
Yeah, I do feel like we should at the very least be keeping up with it, or with, you know, powers like China. I think it's important. David Zell actually mentioned that the other night. He said, you know, it's this idea of Bitcoin's price rising and we're sort of behind the curve as that's going on. It definitely, Bitcoin is leverage, right? It's leverage for the average person that holds it. It's leverage over currency debasement, it's leverage over censorship, all of this stuff. And the United States, being a place that's, I mean, it also sends a message to the world, right? That we're pro this technology, we're pro freedom money, what Bitcoin is. So I think that that's a piece of it. If that's the, you know, if we have to give back this 95,000 Bitcoin, then I think the smart move is then to probably at least be keeping pace with China, maybe have 250,000 Bitcoin or something along those lines. I think China has a little under 200,000. I don't think China is proactively accumulating. Something that I'd be interested in sort of exploring if the government, I don't know, maybe if it had its own mining operations. I just don't really love the idea of printing money to buy it. That's the only thing I sort of feel is a bit unfair. Bitcoin is a voluntary system. People shouldn't be forced into it, and people might feel that way that they should be if the government is then sort of debasing the currency here to produce or to have more Bitcoin on the balance sheet.
I got a question here from Yahim Stone in the chat on YouTube. Will President Trump sign the SBR? What is the incentive for him to do so if it will let other countries know that the American government is actively buying? Your take on that criticism, Mark?
Well, it's what's his incentive to
What's his incentive to announce to the world that the United States is stockpiling Bitcoin through something like a day one executive order?
You know, I think that the strategic thing to do if you're going to accumulate Bitcoin is to be quiet about it to begin with. So I don't know what would be gained by announcing it. You know, if you think about
isn't that what a stockpile order does? Like you said, right? If you want Trump to sign a day one order where the administration won't sell, isn't that as good as buying?
Well, it's definitely good. I mean, that and just not selling would be a sea change in itself. I mean, up until now, whenever the government seizes Bitcoin from a dark website, it's a fait accompli that's going to go back on the market. Right. So just holding it at all, the U.S. government being a hodler, that's like historic stuff by itself, and anything on top of that might be gravy.
Well, of course, we may see such things to come as at noon, an hour from now, President Donald J. Trump will take his second term, the 47th president being sworn in. We're going to go now for a quick commercial break, but we'll be back recapping some of the moments from the campaign trail as we head to inauguration. We'll be right back after these messages.
never sell your Bitcoin.
You're watching Bitcoin Magazine. It's Inauguration Day in New York City. Here we're waiting for, of course, the action in Washington, D.C. We'll be bringing you the swearing in of Donald J. Trump when it happens live starting at noon Eastern. The price of Bitcoin on Gemini.com now, America's exchange, $106,400. Joined again by Mark Hochstein, former CoinDesk editor, and, of course, Frank Corva, senior business reporter at Bitcoin Magazine, talking now about the campaign trail. So obviously this is a culmination, a moment of a political movement that began in some ways all the way back in 2019. This is when we saw Donald Trump make his first statements about Bitcoin, calling it a scam, saying he doesn't like it because it competes against the dollar, saying he wants the dollar to be the currency of the world. Of course, Trump was then in office. So how do we take first term Trump? How do we look at that? I'm going to go, Frank, over to you for some thoughts and recollection on maybe where this all began, which is Trump, like many of us, dismissing Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think, when you bring up, I think it was a tweet he put out, right? It was maybe a thread that he put out about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency more broadly being a scam, and I wouldn't touch it, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not going to lie, when I heard him saying that he was warming up to Bitcoin, I was quite skeptical. Because I remembered that tweet well. I remember how scared I was, because I think at the time, I don't remember all the details, but I think Mnuchin, people were working together to, I believe, I put KYC on wallets. I forget exactly what it was.
There are some public accusations. Mike Brock from Square, or now Block, has even said that Trump may have been working on a Bitcoin ban.
Right, exactly. So that stuff, definitely, that was still there towards the beginning of when Trump started speaking about this. I remember when he started getting louder about it, which was, I think, at the Libertarian National Convention in D.C. in May of 2024, it got my attention because I think he was legitimately, it seemed he was being authentic when he talked about freeing Ross. So that seemed very, very exciting to me, which then made me think, okay, who's in his ear? If he's talking about this sort of issue as it relates to Bitcoin, then someone who really gets this has to be talking to him, which made me think, okay, then maybe something is going on here. I interviewed Vivek Ramaswamy a few months back, and he told me about how he had these conversations with Trump right after I think he dropped out of the race, when Vivek said that he wasn't going to, or after Iowa, after the caucus, when he dropped out, he wasn't going to run for the Republican nomination anymore. He wanted to pass along sort of the libertarian torch to Trump, saying, look, there are these things that libertarians are going to care about, that Bitcoiners are going to care about. And that's really when I started thinking, okay, there might be something legitimate here, and he may have really actually shifted his perspective on Bitcoin.
Yeah, the next bullet on the timeline would be Bitcoin 2023. I think this is the first time we saw a lot of politicians come out as expressly pro-Bitcoin, pro-crypto. You mentioned Vivek Ramaswamy. We saw Robert F. Kennedy Jr., then a Democratic presidential candidate, but also Francis Suarez, right then, looking to make a splash as a presidential candidate. He was the mayor of Miami, taking his salary in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. So maybe some fledgling movements there. But Mark, curious for your read, when this all began, this political movement, did you think that the Bitcoin and crypto community, the companies, lobbyists, et cetera, would succeed in getting their preferred candidate to the White House if you were to go back and tell yourself as you were covering those events?
2 years ago, I would not have predicted this. It really was impressive how crypto became a political force in 2024.
Because the midterms, there were people who ran on expressly Bitcoin and pro-crypto platforms who didn't perform well, right? Right, Mark? Congratulations there.
Yeah. No, I think even going into 2023, the idea that crypto would be, or Bitcoin would be a politically strong constituency was just unthinkable. And yet in 2024, it really asserts itself. And I think that's partly due to coalition building on the part of Trump. Trump's coalition was sort of this interesting combination of populism and tech. And we're seeing some tension in that coalition now, but coalitions are, by definition, disparate groups. And but also, just to be honest, crypto has money, And I think that Trump probably perceived that there were donations to be had. There were donors to be had.
Well, of course, he began dabbling in the industry as far back as 2022, 2023 with his NFT collections, but want to go to May 2024, which is really, I think, when the reversal, quote unquote, started, right? He started saying that Biden is against it, Gensler is against it, the Democrats are against it. He's for it. The famous quote, if you like crypto, you better vote for Trump. Then later that month, as you alluded to, Frank, the Libertarian Convention, talking about how he wanted Bitcoin to be mined in the USA, supporting the right to self-custody, taking aim at Elizabeth Warren, and then offering to free Ross. And so is the right interpretation of this that there was a grassroots sort of movement that really just Trump saw and he identified the opportunity?
I think absolutely. And I think actually to really understand that, you have to go a little bit even further back than what I was saying. And you just alluded to it. I think in Bitcoin 2023, we had RFK come out and give a very, very convincing talk that he was a Bitcoiner, that he was pro-Bitcoin, talking about the importance of self-custody, being able to hold your own keys, things like this. And I would imagine Trump saw some of the response to that. There was a very authentic response to that. I think for a while, especially since well before RFK joined Trump's team, people were worried about how many votes he was going to peel away from Democrats or Republicans, and then how much from each party. So I think Trump probably saw the opportunity, saying, okay, well, his message resonated with people. Plus, we don't want him peeling away votes from Republicans, independent votes that might go to Republicans otherwise. So it made sense for him to embrace it at that point. I just think the writing was on the wall. And I would say I was actually less surprised that Trump embraced it as I was at how much the Democrats didn't when it was very clear that this was something that many, many Americans cared about. I covered some of the Stand with Crypto events this year, and one of the most surprising stats or figures that I heard while on that trail was a former congressman. It was at the Philadelphia stop, and he said something: more people own Bitcoin and crypto in the United States than stocks. So it seems strange to me. That doesn't seem like a tough statistic to dig up, and it seems strange that any political party would ignore something that's that big at this point.
Well, if it certainly started small by Bitcoin 2024, I would argue it was big. Trump giving the keynote there, and going to read some of the quotes because obviously I think they've informed how we're thinking about Inauguration Day and ahead, but wanting the U.S. to be the crypto capital of the, quote, planet, talking about the strategic national Bitcoin reserve, as Mark alluded to, and then pledging that the U.S. government would keep its Bitcoin holdings. So really, I think he's set the tone. Is there a way, Mark, in your view, I guess, how does he succeed on this, right? He's set so much enthusiasm, so much expectation for what he'll do for this industry, already delivering all-time highs, not in office. How does he succeed on that, or how does he build on that?
He's got to keep his promises. He's got to, as I think was alluded to earlier, he really does need to commute Ross Ulbricht's sentence. Maybe not today, but this week. He's got to hold on to that Bitcoin, that seized Bitcoin, as the beginning of the reserve. He's got to be supportive of legislation that is positive. The Loomis bill again faces an uphill battle, but he's got to be supportive of that. He's got to be supportive of other crypto-related legislation, stablecoin legislation, market structure legislation. So he's really got to follow through, and he's got a lot on his plate. It's very easy for us to get caught up in these very crypto-specific things, but he's made a lot of other promises about his broad policy agenda, which some people may or may not agree with. But yeah, he's really got it. It's really just a matter of executing that.
And a lot of expectation, of course. We'll see that maybe happen live today, and maybe as Donald Trump makes his first executive orders as the first crypto president. We're going to send it back now to another interview from this weekend's Crypto Ball in Washington, D.C. This was the inaugural sort of event celebrating President Trump's election. We're going to hear now from a Coinbase executive. We'll be right back after this.
So what a time to be a Bitcoiner. We're here celebrating in the capital of the United States of America. Yeah. Did you see this coming?
Oh, it's unbelievable. If you thought about where we were even a few months ago, let alone like a year ago, who would have ever imagined we would have a new president who's committed to Bitcoin and crypto? We'd have this many people coming to celebrate the potential for crypto in the United States. It's been an unbelievable celebration, and we're excited to be a part of it.
Speaking of unbelievable, who would you say your MVP, your most valuable player of 2024 would be?
Well, it'd have to be Donald Trump. I mean, he's the guy that essentially made the decision for the country that we were going to make the United States the crypto and Bitcoin capital of the world. And he campaigned on it. He was very vocal about it. He got a mandate on it, and now he's going to execute on it. And I think we owe him a huge debt of gratitude.
100%. What do you think about the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve?
I think it's something the United States needs to take action on. I think there's a national security imperative to keep up with the rest of the world. There's a lot of indications that countries are strategically accumulating Bitcoin, either directly or indirectly. And there'll be an inflection point at some point where people will begin to adopt digital gold as opposed to solid, mineral gold as a backing asset. And I think the United States needs to be in the lead on that.
And how would that work? Would, the United States hold the keys, or who would hold the keys, or what would that structure look like?
Yeah, ultimately the United States would be the owner. What the custody arrangements are, there are different ways you can do it, but in the end of the day, it has to be a governmental asset under government control, and I think there's a lot of people thinking really hard about how to execute on that.
If you could pass a law or a bill that is pro Bitcoin and crypto in the United States for 2025, what would you pass?
I would pass something like what the House passed last year, the FIT 21, because that's the area in which the regulatory uncertainty is most pronounced. So market structure rules, basically explaining what's a commodity, what's a security, and having rules around how you trade it, and then having clear rules around the issuance of stable coins. I think once you get those two foundational things done, most of the rest of the regulatory uncertainty around the ecosystem ultimately gets resolved.
What would you say the most important policies are that the Trump administration needs to get right?
Well, the most important thing that President Trump can do is what he's already done, which is to put a very clear political commitment to make the U.S. a crypto capital. I think once you have the President of the United States say something clear like that, it penetrates all levels of government in the United States, and all the 100 decisions that bureaucrats and policymakers have to make is going to be informed by the fact that the president has committed the U.S. to be a crypto and Bitcoin capital. We've already seen, actually, as a global company, that impact in other jurisdictions. They're watching what the United States is doing. They want to make sure they don't get left behind. And so having a situation where the U.S. was behind and now is about to step up into the lead is really exciting.
So can you tell us about Operation Choke Point 2.0? What was it, and do you think that will be a distant memory in the industry?
It won't be a distant memory for us. We're going to track this down and help investigators identify exactly what happened. You had regulators using the power of government to attack a group that politically they decided they needed to go after. And so withholding banking services from individuals for political purposes is wrong and potentially illegal. And I think it's the kind of thing that needs to be ultimately brought into the sunshine so people see what happened and then people are held to account.
100%. They need to be held accountable for all the things that they've done. They've completely invaded our freedom in a way.
Yeah.
And obviously, with Operation Choke Point 2.0, we're seeing these goons sort of step down now that you have Trump coming into office.
Yeah. Well, there's a changeover in regulators, and so you'll have Trump regulators who are committed to freedom and to the basic principle that people should have access to basic banking services. They deserve clear rules from the government. But the regulators who are leaving, who had a hand in using the power of the state for political purposes, should be held to account. So I don't think we've heard the last of what's going to happen on that. And I think it's important for all of us in the industry, for sure, to look forward and build for the future, but also to remember that the only way to make sure the bad things that happen don't happen again is to hold those people to account.
And it's good that you guys are helping us do that, because sometimes, what can we do to hold them accountable for all the things that they've done?
Yeah. Well, I mean, among the things we're doing is we're doing these Freedom of Information Act requests, unearthing some of the documents that demonstrate what exactly happened. So I think learning exactly how it was done and how the industry was targeted for political reasons is the first step towards that accountability. And we at Coinbase are very committed to see that through.
And what is your outlook on Bitcoin's next epoch in the United States? Bullish or bearish?
Well, I'm no expert on what the markets are doing, but it's hard not to be bullish if you're in an audience like this and you see the energy, particularly among the top incoming policymakers in the United States. So it's a good time to be in Bitcoin and crypto.
100%. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you.
It's 45 minutes to inauguration, and we're here broadcasting live. It's Bitcoin Magazine at the PubKey Bar in New York. It's Inauguration Day 2025. The price of Bitcoin on Gemini.com, $104,000. Joined by new panel here, Nolan Bowerly, host of Bitcoin on Rumble, and Nigo Moran, host of the Simply Bitcoin podcast. The topic now, we're turning to the first 100 days, a seminal point in any presidency, and some would say the defining period of a presidency where the new leader takes office, sets the tone. So maybe let's talk about the expectations for the 100 days, strategic reserve, Ross Ulbricht, maybe a new crypto regulation, maybe even, we've seen the photos from the crypto ball, Michael Saylor rubbing shoulders with secretaries of the Treasury. How much can get done in 100 days? Nolan, what's your take on what we're about to see?
Well, any new CEO, if you remember when Elon Musk took over X and Twitter, right, he fired all kinds of people, and it was, you got to make your mark.
Let that sink in.
Let that sink in, right? You got to make your mark right away. And one of the big tide shifts that I want to see in this administration, with Scott Bessent having his nomination hearings the other day on the Hill, I think it was Friday, I want to see that tension between the Treasury and the Federal Reserve out in the open, out in public, and start to see what's going on. Will Trump submit to the Federal Reserve, right? We've got 5-year bonds from COVID that were printed that need to be refinanced. There's the debt ceiling issue that we just saw that Janet Yellen left this administration with. So suddenly, there is an opportunity for Bitcoin to enter the mainstream conversation right on center stage. We could see new debt instruments released, for example, right? Will the Federal Reserve continue its path of being sort of the economic engine of the country? They're the ones who say what's going to happen, what interest rates are going to be, or will Treasury wrestle back power using Bitcoin? That's what I'm excited about.
Maybe explain this dynamic. Obviously, a lot of excitement, a little bit news to me. So how does the central bank policy get changed? I mean, it seems like the central bank has sort of signaled to Trump saying that they're looking to stay status quo and, remain nonpartisan.
Well, we'll see about that, because what will happen is you've got the bonds that have to go to the public market. Now, in the Biden administration, the public market was nothing. No one showed up. The Saudis didn't come to buy the bonds. The Chinese didn't come to buy the bonds. The Japanese, who would normally be there to buy the bonds, didn't buy the bonds. And so the Federal Reserve was buying them. And to make that interesting for the Federal Reserve, the interest rates had to be high. So suddenly, we know Trump doesn't want high interest rates in America, right? He's got trillions of dollars to refinance instantly. It's been 5 years since COVID, and that big print happened.
So you see immediate action here on the level of government budgeting and planning. That's where you're expecting the battleground to be for this administration? Is that
Indeed. I imagine some kind of new debt instrument that will bring power to the Treasury. Policies from the Treasury that will embrace Bitcoin, that will actually create an interest in the rest of the world to join our bond market, not just the Federal Reserve. We can't be doing the same thing where we're sucking and blowing at the same time. And that's what we want to avoid. Treasury here has an opportunity to make the Federal Reserve submit to it and create interest in markets around the world. And we could see something like Bitcoin added to a bond. We can see ways that we don't just have to put interest rates higher so that the rest of the world is interested. So what I want to see is some kind of clever maneuver from Scott Bessent to wrestle power away from the Federal Reserve. We're talking about the biggest fight in the world, and you can actually get the energy of Bitcoin behind that. We can start seeing the energy that we have backing Bitcoin in our energy markets find its way into the markets, into these bond markets. So primary dealers are going to be dealing with Bitcoin for the first time ever. And I'm not talking about ETF stuff. I'm talking about Bitcoin added to the mix.
Nico, I want to go over to you 100 days. Obviously, Nolan here, incredibly bullish, talking about new administration, maybe using Bitcoin and energy to back bonds. Do you think that is realistic, given all of the turmoil that's in the U.S. political scene these days? We're talking about Trump and really just how much political capital he has and where he should spend it. Does it get spent on some of these things, in your view?
I think absolutely. I mean, if you look at the betting markets, right, it's over 50% now. It's 60% that this strategic Bitcoin reserve happens. You heard the conversation on Trump in interviews. I don't know if he fully understands what he's saying, but he's saying, like, look, we'll use the Bitcoin thing to pay off some of the debt. So I think he's really, really serious about it. And I think it's actually feasible. I think it was Michael Saylor that said this, but something along the lines of the first country that uses its central bank, that uses its fiat money printer to buy Bitcoin is going to win. And that's totally something that's absolutely possible. Now, is it going to happen within the first 100 days? I don't know. Is it going to happen within Trump's administration? Probably. But I will say this. The Republicans have a slim majority in the House, which is all you need, but they don't have a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate. So they need to go across the aisle. They need to ask the Democrats to get some of those votes. I believe they have 53 Senate seats. So, and historically speaking, what tends to happen is the incumbent party loses the midterm. So Trump really has 2 years of being able to pass pro-Bitcoin regulation, pro-Bitcoin policy, and really get the strategic Bitcoin reserve through. And of course, I mean, if you look at his cabinet picks, like you look at the people that Trump is putting in.
You've got Vivek, Tulsi, you've got RFK. These are people who are at Bitcoin conferences.
They're extremely pro-Bitcoin, right? So I think the whole outlook or towards the industry or how they view the industry is going to completely change, and I think it's going to be for the better. Now, the danger here, and I say danger, is it's going to be pro-Bitcoin, but it's also going to be pro-crypto, and because it's pro-crypto, I think a lot of people are going to get burnt, and they might not know the difference between the two industries. So there is a little bit of a danger there, but we shall see. I'll tell you what, though, one last thing. I think it's going to be way better than what we experienced the last 4 years under the Biden administration. So I'm really, really excited for that. And from a number go up perspective, I think if a strategic Bitcoin reserve does happen, I'm going to say this live on air, Pete, we will see 500K Bitcoin this year.
Love it. Love the predictions. Of course, we're going to get into a bevy of those later after Donald Trump is inaugurated. So stay with us all day. We'll be broadcasting for the 4 p.m. Eastern. Come by PubKey in New York. We're broadcasting. I want to go back to the question, really, I think, maybe even just stepping back and asking in a different way. How does America win? How does America use Bitcoin to win? You've talked about some of these policies, Nolan. I want to dive a little bit deeper into you because you're talking about central bank policy, maybe moving away from some of these practices, moving away from operating the world's financial system. Do you have a sense of how we do that strategically? Like, what does a perfect 4 years look like? Where do we get?
Well, we had the petrodollar for a long time. The petrodollar was really where the dollar gained meaning, and then all other fiat currencies gained meaning relative to the US dollar. It was sort of the denominator of the world. Winning looks a lot like what we've got in El Salvador. El Salvador has already embraced something called bimetallism. So one money for spending and one money for saving. America wins when we make saving money easy again. And that's always been Bitcoin's great offer, right? That's when we talk about the low time preference that Bitcoin cultivates in people. That's what it comes down to. America's brains not running on government debt anymore. Americans' brains running on the ease of saving money. El Salvador has embraced that. We see Argentina that has lived in this bimetallic world for a long time where you had the peso to buy coffee and the dollar to save money. For them, you're going to see a shift with Milei, I think, to what El Salvador has, where the dollar is for coffee and the Bitcoin is for saving. America can get to that world because we've been living with the Cantillon effect for years. We've been living with America enriching its techno-capitalist, anarcho-tyrannic system. We're going to enter a place where it's anarcho-capitalism now, where we are not really along the way totally to a Bitcoin standard or a gold standard, but just as the fiat system was created through an era of bimetallism, that's what we had before, silver and gold, we're going to back out of the fiat system using this same formula, where Americans can have policy dollars, the US dollar, but saving will be easy again. You'll be able to stack your sats. That's going to take a lot of pressure off of Americans. They're not going to need an IQ of 130 to keep up and beat Wall Street, beat the policymakers, because that's impossible. Look what it's done. Look what it's done to America. We've got division, we've got poverty. Look at poor North Carolina. I mean, imagine going there and looking at that. It's been months and it's still destroyed from that storm that they had. So America winning is having low interest rates, not jacked by the rest of the world having to be interested in our bond market because we have this new instrument that I mentioned before. It wins when saving is easy again and there is some form of detachment from the rest of the world trying to gain their currency versus ours. America just having a normal currency again would be a big win.
Of course, the geopolitical upheaval from Trump's presidency still to come. That was Nolan Bowerly. You can follow him on Rumble. We're going to go now to an interview from Nick Spanos at the Crypto Ball in D.C. this weekend. This is with Mr. Nick Spanos, a Bitcoin pioneer, of course, a great Bitcoin pioneer in New York. We'll be right back after this interview.
is it that we're here celebrating a pro-Bitcoin president, yet most of us are Bitcoiners and are, fan of freedom, decentralization. The government that governs least is the one that governs best.
Sure, I buy that. I mean, I originally came from politics, and I worked for Ron Paul for many years, so it's pretty, feels pretty good. Finally.
100%. You mentioned Ron Paul. Ron Paul has been sort of like a hero for many Bitcoiners. Do you think we're going to see Ron Paul here?
I don't think Ron's in town. Maybe Rand's in town. I'm not sure. I got to ask him. I didn't ask. Oh, yeah, for the bluegrass ball. I think it's right now. The Kentucky ball that happens to be right now, yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, what is...
There, maybe, after.
What do you say is one of... Some bourbon?
I don't drink.
What would you say is one of Ron Paul's favorite quotes or favorite leaders?
We've been overtaxed, overregulated, and overrun by bureaucrats. The founding fathers would be ashamed of us for what we're putting up with.
Oh, I like that. 100%. The founding fathers should be ashamed. Do you think the founding fathers would be Bitcoiners?
Oh, for sure, yeah. Well, they said gold and silver, only gold and silver shall be legal tender. But the banksters got a hold of that one, mangled it up for us 2 nights before Christmas, 1913, yeah.
It's kind of crazy what they...
Senators only, yeah.
Did you think that all that was going to happen? That 1910, the creation of the Federal Reserve, and we're here now being taxed without representation.
Well, I've been fighting the Federal Reserve since 1991. So, it felt like I threw my life away many times over the years, but not tonight. Feels good.
Finally, trying to win some points. What would you say, or is that it moment for us?
Which moment?
An it moment.
It?
Yeah, like that it moment that we made it. We're kind of like turning the tides. We've been since like 1910. They've been putting all these regulations up. The creation of the Federal Reserve, 1971 when they eliminated the gold.
Well, in the past, when they only had a few media sources, people thought that the dollar was still backed by gold, and Fort Knox held the gold. Even after 71, most people still thought that. And I think it took a long time for us. We had a bill on the floor, ordered the Fed, and we passed it in the House, but then we got screwed in the Senate. But Ron wrote a few books, and we mobilized with a group we had, Campaign for Liberty, and another group we had, End the Fed, where we would yell at buildings. But then, when Bitcoin came out, to me it was very clear that we finally, had a weapon against these guys. And so that's what we did. I launched the first live cryptocurrency exchange right next to the New York stock market, 100 feet, in 2013. And gave away a lot of Bitcoin to teach the stockbrokers how to trade it. And I hope I had some part maybe helping out. But I feel good. Finally, I feel good. Yeah.
Do you
feel weird? Yeah, it feels weird.
Yeah, with all the suits in here.
I died of a heart attack in my sleep.
Hi.
And there's like some other reality.
Well, speaking of that, do you think the death of the Federal Reserve will come soon?
Well, that's what I've been working on since 1991.
And how is that looking out? Do you see the light at the end of the tunnel?
Wait, we just spoke about death, and you're asking about the light at the end of the tunnel?
Well, and the death of the Federal Reserve, and you said you're fighting against them, so I'm assuming, do you see the light at the end of the tunnel with that battle? Are they going to let it go that easy? Because, wasn't there like a whistleblower that just mysteriously died when they sued the Federal Reserve?
Well, there's probably a lot of them, yeah. It's worth a shot. It's our only hope, You look like Princess Leia. Obi-Wan, you're our only hope. Young Princess Leia, young.
Well, I am honored. I'm honored that I look like Princess Leia.
Bitcoin, you're our only hope. Bitcoin.
But that we're talking about death and everything, we got to die trying.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I believe so. I mean, it got close many times, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you.
It's amazing.
That was the lovely Isabella Santos of Bitcoin Magazine. We're back broadcasting live at PubKey in New York City. It's Inauguration Day. We're 30 minutes from the 47th President of the United States taking the oath of office. The price of Bitcoin on Gemini.com, $104,800, six figures. And of course, we've got two guests here. Back with us, Nolan Bowerly, host of Bitcoin on Rumble, and Tom PubKey, founder of PubKey, all the way on the left, his establishment here, talking now about the geopolitical upheaval that could come from the Trump presidency about to happen, from his embrace of Bitcoin, talking about how Trump can make the average American's life better. Inflation is up. There's a lack of confidence in the U.S. debt markets and our ability to pay for our exorbitant debt. Tom, over to you. How does Donald Trump, right the ship here in terms of making the average person's life better, really, because that's his goal as the president, right?
Yeah, for sure. Look, it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks. Day one starting later today. I think a bunch of executive orders are going to be signed. Doge, a little bit in flux. Not sure where Vivek is going to be going.
Of government efficiency?
Yeah, and one of the co-heads, Vivek Ramaswamy, announcing that he's going to run for governor of Ohio. I think that's official. I'm not sure if that's still in the rumor mill, but I think we were putting a lot of emphasis on this new Doge department, whatever, cutting, budget, right? Cutting costs, and not so much focusing on the revenue side of things. It's anybody's guess where this is going. I'm laser focused on, that Ross Ulbricht, pardon or clemency, whatever we're calling it, whatever it ends up being. I think that's the number one thing. I think we already delivered. Bitcoiners delivered for the Trump campaign. So it's time to, deliver for us, starting with that. SBR and other things I think are beneficial for Americans, American businesses, America on a geopolitical level. It gets really complicated because you're tying in other parts of government that you can't necessarily control from the White House. So we'll see where it goes.
Well, we've got the chats running here on X, YouTube, and Rumble. AAR saying Bitcoin is a shield, not a weapon. Obviously happy to ask any questions to our panelists here. Nolan, over to you, though. Wasn't this election in some ways a referendum on just the high cost of living, right? Now we have a president launching multiple cryptocurrencies. I mean, how do you make the message that this is all going to uplift the American people? Or do you think that there could be a backlash to some of Trump's crypto and Bitcoin activities?
There certainly could be a backlash, but again, Bitcoiners have long understood that one of the greatest gateway drugs is to see the actual chaos of crypto, right? Learning that all of this stuff is infinite supply, right? It was one thing when Trump released Trump coin, then Melania coin comes out, and suddenly you realize
rumors of a Barron coin.
You realize this stuff is infinite in supply.
There was one great tweet that was like, there are literally so many Trump family members. Right?
Yeah, I'm holding out for the Tiffany coin.
Tiffany coin could be a bit of sleeper, the sleeper coin, the sleeper hit.
Don't we worry about, because the American public, people are upset right now. They don't feel like they're getting ahead. Sure. What kind of message does this thing say?
Again, Bitcoin it's not an information access problem or an IQ problem. It's always been an appetite for reality. Bitcoin is finite in supply. It is a hard stop with reality. It's a brick wall in that way. And crypto is not that, of course. Now, you can't just learn that reality by getting a bunch of information and coming to a conclusion. We all know that it requires contrast. It requires a certain cognitive dissonance that comes. We've all been burned by crypto. We all understand the scamminess of that industry. And that's what has been probably the greatest attractive force. The physics around Bitcoin are learning that fiat is this printable scam, and Bitcoin exist within this contrast.
Well, speaking of contrasts, perhaps no greater contrast right now than President Trump and President Bukele of El Salvador last night buying 10 Bitcoin, obviously amassed 6,000 Bitcoin for his relatively small country. Tom, I want to go over to you. Your view on just, President Trump contrasting with Nayib Bukele here. Are these basically just two people with two different strategies, or should Trump really be following what Bukele is doing in your view?
It hasn't started yet, right? Like, there's a big difference between the campaign and the administration. We know in the first administration for Trump, there were some negative things said about Bitcoin in particular. Mnuchin, I think, had a last-minute order that didn't come to pass on the way out, and there was lots of confusion with COVID and everything. But proof is in the pudding. He hasn't had the power to effectuate any of these things. You can point to the Casasius coin and whether or not that got swept right after the gift was there, or other items, buying Ethereum and launching the Trump token. They do a lot of things, right? They sell watches, they sell books, they sell tickets to shows. It's a media company in many ways. But we'll see what actually happens when he takes office later today, and how quickly some of the Bitcoin agenda items that he promised to the community in Nashville, here at PubKey, and subsequent moments on the campaign trail start to play out.
Well, of course, expecting history to come just 25 minutes away from Trump's oath of office. Going to send it now to a recap of Trump's purchase here at PubKey on the campaign trail. We'll be back talking with Tom PubKey of PubKey after this.
Great, right? Hello, everybody. Hi.
Right here. Take pictures. Right there. Right there. Just that one.
Great.
Need to refresh the invoice. Did we refresh the invoice?
Oh, it did go through. All right, we're done.
Perfect. There we
The
go.
first transaction by a president on the Bitcoin protocol. History.
You know what that means? It's history. It's history of the making. Hello, everybody. I got to go back and see those people.
All right, let's go.
Come on.
Right this way.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Hello,
President Trump, what
you? Nice to see you. It's been a while, huh?
Do you feel safe, Mr. President? Are you looking at any private security in addition? After
No, I feel very safe.
So much. President Trump, we, us Bitcoin fanatics here in New York, we love this bar. We just wanted your impression. What's your impression of PubKey?
I think it's a great place. I just made the first transaction in Bitcoin. We appreciate it. I have another statement to make. Everybody that's a crypto guy, crypto maniac as I call them, because they really are.
We're a little bit
they
wild,
believe,
right? Yeah,
but
we're a little
everybody,
wild.
whether it's Bitcoin but crypto, get out and vote. Because if you vote, we cannot lose. We cannot lose. We want to get everybody that agrees with you people what you're doing. One, do you want a hamburger?
These burgers are killer. They really
They're
are.
good.
Save your bite.
That's great, man. How's that nice?
That's perfect. Amazing. Beautiful. And one more right here would be fantastic. If you don't mind, and then we have some gifts for you up front.
Good. I want Bitcoin. Okay, you got it.
We appreciate your open-mindedness. Thank you so much for coming here.
No,
We
it's
really
great.
appreciate
It's a new era, and that's
Paradigm.
what's happening. It's amazing to see what's happened in such a short period of time. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Mr. President, you want to hit some out?
Okay, you got it. Have a good time, everybody. We're going now to Nassau Coliseum.
Safe travels.
Packed house. Thank you. Thank you.
We're 23 minutes away from Donald J. Trump's inauguration, his second term, coming up, broadcasting live at PubKey in New York City, of course, with the founder of PubKey, Thomas Pakia, to his right, Nolan Bowerly, host of Bitcoin on Rumble, winding down here as we get to the big moment, talking about how the first crypto president could change the world. I want to talk about the whole global perspective. If you're a global world leader, we saw Michael Saylor meeting with a member of the French Parliament this weekend. How are you reacting to Trump's first 100 days, to these executive orders? What are you thinking about as a world leader if you're watching Trump come on to this position with the economy in mind? No one.
Well, you're seeing someone who's not going to do business as usual. You're seeing someone who's saying to the world, I'm going to put the American citizen before international banking. And we haven't seen that before. So this changes the entire formula for the Japanese and the Chinese, who have been currency manipulating forever, right? This has been the game. The game has been to make America the dumping ground for your products, to make debt very cheap in America so that we can afford to buy everything from around the world all the time. And this equilibrium is now broken. So if you're around the world, you're saying things are going to change, right? America is going to re-enter manufacturing even perhaps. We don't know exactly if it's going to be robots or the jobs are coming back. I'm not sure that formula is real. But you're seeing that something else is happening here, that the US dollar is going to be something else entirely, and that there's a new formula for how the world financial system is going to work. Now, if you look at what's happening with Bukele over these years, you're starting to see the trend. Bukele was at the forefront of this. I predict Bukele and Trump are going to become the best of friends in the future.
Well, interesting that you mentioned Bukele, because I just want to note another, president who came in, big expectations, promised a lot, and a lot of things that didn't come to fruition. We'll go down the list: the Bitcoin bonds, the volcano mining, maybe a little bit coming on recently, but promising a Bitcoin city, right? If we remember, one of the iconic images from 2021 was Nayib Bukele coming out in front of a giant presentation of a golden city, basically promising that there would be a Bitcoin, a new city built, powered by Bitcoin mining. So the gap between really, the potential and the reality, where, he's renegotiated with the IMF, they've walked back some of the more progressive legislation. Is that a concern that kind of situation could play out, Thomas?
U.S. is in a slightly different position than El Salvador, particularly from where Bukele started. You have other countries as well, right? Bhutan, you have some that are front running. They haven't made announcements yet. I think a lot of rumblings out of, the Emirates and some Middle Eastern countries, scooping this up. Mining's also a big open question, right? If you're Russia and China and you're looking at some of the things Trump has been saying in support of the mining industry and American energy industries, you got to think that they only have a certain amount of time to get this activated and, counterbalance a lot of the flow from China amongst the Bitcoin mining companies to Texas, to elsewhere in the United States. So I think a lot of it is sort of front running potentially, or copy trading in post. Back to El Salvador, though, there has been some other progress, right? We don't have a ton of visibility into exactly what the negotiations with the IMF looked like. Tether is moving to El Salvador. Chivo is getting scrapped, but I don't think that Chivo had tremendous traction in the first place, or was terribly popular across the entire country. So El Salvador as a archetype is a good place to start for sure. Like if we get some of those things out of the Trump administration, I think that we'll be woohooing.
And I would add to that I can imagine Trump is going to go on the same road as Bukele went with that city and perhaps complete the deal. Trump has already announced that he's going to launch something called a Freedom City contest. He's a real estate man after all, right? And he's been talking about building 10 fresh cities out of nothing.
Right.
And one could imagine of those 10 cities in this competition. One could imagine one of these 10 cities is going to have some kind of Bitcoin mining finance mechanism for the energy supply. For example, a Bitcoin miner financing a small modular nuclear reactor or whatever they use for it. You can see this happening, right? Trump has also announced that America is going to have its World's Fair for America for the 250th. You could easily see incredible power systems globally. Tesla made his name in the Chicago World's Fair, showing a hydroelectric dam for the first time and illuminating the entire fair. I can easily imagine Trump embracing Bitcoin for that purpose alone, showing that not municipalities or states, I mean, that's where nuclear energy kind of went off a cliff. Once you took out a state actor as a buyer, the whole thing fell apart. This is actually private financed energy for the first time ever, and it's feasible. And you can imagine the anchor tenant argument really gaining traction, right? It's the anchor tenant, it's a grocery store for a strip mall. And that's what a Bitcoin mining apparatus can be for energy finance. Bukele could learn from Trump in this way. Trump is a real estate man.
Maybe Greenland.
Maybe Greenland.
We've got Amoeba Joe in the chat. Quote, a new age beginning in 28 minutes. Or no, sorry, 18 minutes. We'll see President Trump sworn in. Going to go back to the crypto ball in D.C. from over the weekend. We've got an interview now with Natalie Brunell, who made waves with a particularly interesting dress that sent a message to the world. We'll be right back after this message.
course, we have a little Met Gala moment. Can you show us the back of the dress? Fix the money, fix the world. What does that quote mean to you?
It means that we can all come together and have a solution that will actually work. It's not about taxing the rich. It's not about blaming each other or getting political. It's actually about addressing the fundamental economic issue that's facing all of us, which is that our money loses value. And now we can finally fix it. So Bitcoin fixes this, fix the money.
100%. You got to wear your statement and what you believe in.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, we're here in DC, and Trump posted a photo not too long ago in a private airplane with Elon Musk, RFK. They're all eating Mickey D's. Who would your entourage be if you were the U.S. president?
That is so hard. There are so many people I wish were Bitcoiners, like, I don't know, like Dua Lipa, you know, I love her. I would have my mom in my entourage, though. She's a Bitcoiner, so she counts. I don't know. I mean, any of the amazing women that have done so much, and the women that we're going to orange pill this year.
I like that. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I love seeing you. Right now. Yes, I love it. Thank you.
It's Bitcoin Magazine. History is happening now. The price of Bitcoin, $106,400 on Gemini.com. We're going to go now live to Washington, D.C., where Donald J. Trump is on C-SPAN. He's going to be sworn in as the 47th president and the first crypto president of the United States. We'll be right back after his speech.
Please welcome the chairwoman of the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, the Honorable Amy Klobuchar.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 60th presidential inauguration. Today, President-elect Trump and Vice President-elect Vance will take their oaths of office, and we will witness the peaceful transfer of power at the heart of our democracy. For the past year, I've chaired the inaugural ceremony committee, which includes the leadership of Congress from both parties. We thank the committee and Capitol staff and law enforcement who worked so hard over the last year, and especially the last 3 days. You've done a beautiful job, and you have shown grace under pressure. Our theme this year is our enduring democracy. The presence of so many presidents and vice presidents here today is truly a testament to that endurance. We welcome President Biden and Dr. Biden. We welcome Vice President Harris and Doug Emhoff, President Obama, President Clinton and Secretary Clinton, President Bush and Laura Bush, Vice President Pence, Vice President Quayle and Marilyn Quayle. The justices of the United States Supreme Court are with us, all 9 of them I counted, and of course the Trump and Vance families. This ceremony marks what will soon be 250 years of our democracy. It is the moment when leaders elevated by the will of the people promise to be faithful to our Constitution, to cherish and defend it. It is the moment when they become, as we all should be, the guardians of our country. Through war and peace, through adversity and prosperity, we hold this inauguration every 4 years, and today it falls on Martin Luther King Day. A further reminder that we must strive to uphold the values enshrined in our Constitution, the freedoms, the liberties, and, as is inscribed on the entrance of the United States Supreme Court, equal justice under law. But what makes this moment more than a passing ceremony is all who are watching it across the country, the people of this nation, the ordinary people doing extraordinary things. President Kennedy, who at one point worked as a senator in this building, and would often walk through this very rotunda, once said, "In a democracy, every citizen, regardless of interest in politics, holds office. Every one of us is in a position of responsibility." With that responsibility of citizenship comes an obligation not to seek out malice, as President Lincoln once reminded us, but to view others with a generosity of spirit despite our differences. With that responsibility of leadership comes an obligation to stand our ground when we must and find common ground when we can. With everything swirling around us, the hot mess of division, it is on all of us, to quote an incredible songwriter who just happened to be born in my state, to ensure that our nation's democracy is our shelter from the storm. There's a reason this ceremony takes place at the Capitol. In other countries, it might be in a presidential palace or a gilded executive office building. Here it is traditionally held at the Capitol, the People's House. It is a fitting reminder of the system of checks and balances that is the very foundation of our government, 3 equal branches of government. That is how, for nearly 250 years, our great American experiment, grounded in the rule of law, has endured. So, as we inaugurate a new president and vice president, let us remember that the power of those in this room comes from the people. The construction workers who build our country, the teachers and healthcare workers who nurture us, the troops defending our freedoms, and yes, the firefighters in Los Angeles putting themselves on the line for us. Our democracy's strength and grit must match theirs. May God bless our nation. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Endurance through the years is the ultimate test. To persevere through time is the truest measure of an idea, an institution, and a nation. Our founders wrote the Constitution so that America could withstand all the twists and turns of time. They wrote it to guide us and to preserve forever our right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But as much as the truths and principles enshrined in our Constitution remain the same, our democracy promises the American people the power to change, to chart their own destiny. That's the beauty. That is the importance of democracy. It allows the endurance, the permanence of a nation through change. It allows nations like our United States both to avoid the obstacles and to seize the opportunities God has placed before us, all while staying true to our founding principles. Today is our country's 60th inauguration ceremony. Like all the others before it, it is a celebration of our right to set our uniquely American course. The past several years have been trying at times for many, many Americans, and also for the nations of the free world that we humbly strive to lead. In November, Americans chose again to steer this nation towards greatness, the secure, safe, and prosperous future that our founders envisioned for all of us. And today, we celebrate not only their decision to do so, but also the simple right and wisdom of a free people to make their own choice so that their nation might endure. And now, allow me to welcome Archbishop Timothy Dolan and Reverend Franklin Graham, who will deliver our invocation. Please rise.
Be still and know that I am God, supreme among the nations, supreme on the earth. Let us pray. Remembering General George Washington on his knees at Valley Forge, recalling Abraham Lincoln at his second inaugural, with malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right. Remembering General George Patton's instructions to his soldiers as they began the Battle of the Bulge 8 decades ago. Pray. Pray when fighting. Pray alone. Pray with others. Pray by night. Pray by day. Observing the birthday of the Reverend Martin Luther King, who warned, without God, our efforts turn to ashes. We, blessed citizens of this one nation under God, humbled by our claim that in God we trust, gather indeed this Inauguration Day to pray for our President Donald J. Trump, his family, his advisors, his cabinet, his aspirations, his vice president, for the Lord's blessings upon Joseph Biden, for our men and women in uniform, for each other whose hopes are stoked this new year, this Inauguration Day. We cannot err in relying upon that prayer from the Bible, upon which our president will soon place his hand in oath, as we make our own the supplications of King Solomon for wisdom as he began his governance. God of our fathers, in your wisdom you set man to govern your creatures, to govern in holiness and justice, to render justice with integrity. Give our leader wisdom, for he is your servant, aware of his own weakness and brevity of life. If wisdom which comes not from you be not with him, he shall be held in no esteem. Send wisdom from heavens that she may be with him, that he may know your designs. Please, God, bless America. Please mend her every flaw. You are the God in whom we trust, who lives and reigns forever and ever. Amen.
Mr. President, the last 4 years, there are times I'm sure you thought it was pretty dark. But look what God has done. We praise him and give him glory.